Marcus Donovan had spent 15 years teaching others how to survive in the wilderness, but nothing in his extensive experience had prepared him for what crashed into the Alaskan forest 3 miles from his cabin. The sound had been unmistakable, a screaming descent followed by the thunderous impact that shook the ground beneath his feet. His first thought was a small aircraft, perhaps a bush pilot caught in the sudden storm that had rolled in that morning. He grabbed his emergency pack and headed out into the snowfall without hesitation. If anyone had survived, they wouldn't last long in the plummeting temperatures. The storm had already dropped 6 inches of fresh powder, and the wind chill was dropping well below zero. "Hello." Marcus called out as he approached the crash site, but his voice was swallowed by the howling wind. What he found wasn't a downed Cessna or helicopter. The metallic object half buried in snow and earth had no wings, no rotors, just a sleek, oval shape with a surface that seemed to ripple with iridescent colors despite the damage. Steam rose from melted snow around its perimeter, and a jagged tear ran along one side. For a moment, Marcus stood frozen, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. This wasn't possible. Yet the evidence lay before him, undeniable. A sound from within the tear in the hull snapped him out of his shock, a cry that was unmistakably one of pain, yet somehow different. Without further hesitation, Marcus activated his headlamp and approached the opening. "I'm here to help," he called out, though he wondered if whoever, or whatever, was inside would understand. The interior was dimly lit by flickering blue panels. The air inside felt surprisingly warm and carried a scent like ozone and something floral he couldn't identify. As his eyes adjusted, he made out a figure slumped against what appeared to be a control panel. Not human. Definitely not human. The being had a humanoid shape but with skin that shimmered with a faint lavender hue. Instead of hair, a crown of what looked like crystalline filaments adorned her head, now partially matted with a dark liquid that Marcus assumed was blood. Most striking were her eyes as they suddenly opened, large, with vertical pupils and irises of deep violet. They fixed on Marcus with unmistakable intelligence and fear. "Please," the being said, in perfect English that seemed to echo slightly. "My daughter." Marcus felt his reality tilt on its axis as he processed both the fact that this alien spoke English and that she was a mother concerned for her child. Some things, apparently, transcended species. "Where?" he asked simply. The alien woman gestured weakly toward what appeared to be another compartment. Marcus moved carefully in that direction, finding a small pod where a child, unmistakably of the same species but smaller, lay unconscious but breathing. He made a quick decision. "I have shelter nearby. Can you walk?" The adult alien tried to stand but collapsed with a gasp of pain. "My leg, damaged in landing." "I'll come back for you," Marcus promised. "Let me get your daughter to safety first." He gently lifted the child, surprised by how light she felt despite appearing to be about the size of a human 5-year-old. Her skin was warm to the touch, and the crystalline filaments on her head seemed to glow faintly. "Her name?" "Neva," the mother said. "I am Lyra." "Marcus," he replied, adjusting his grip on the child. "I'll be back for you, Lyra. Stay warm." As he trudged through the snow with Neva cradled against his chest, Marcus Donovan realized his life had just changed irrevocably. Whatever came next, he was now involved in humanity's first contact, and 2 lives depended on him. The storm intensified as he made his way back to the cabin, obscuring their tracks almost as quickly as he made them. Perhaps that was for the best, he thought. Whatever had brought Lyra and Neva to Earth, someone might come looking, and Marcus wasn't sure if that would be a good thing for any of them. By the 3rd day, Lyra had recovered enough to sit at Marcus's kitchen table, her injured leg propped on a chair. The makeshift splint he'd fashioned seemed to be helping, though he remained fascinated by how quickly she was healing. Neva had bounced back even faster, her natural curiosity overcoming initial fear. Now she explored the cabin with undisguised wonder, touching everything from the wood-burning stove to the collection of survival manuals on the bookshelf. "Your dwelling is primitive, yet efficient," Lyra remarked, watching Marcus prepare a stew from his stored provisions. "We have nothing like this where I come from." "And where exactly is that?" Marcus asked, not for the first time. He'd been patient, giving them space to recover before pressing for details. Lyra's crystalline filaments, which Marcus now understood functioned something like hair, but also seemed to respond to her emotions, rippled with subtle blue patterns. "Our home world is called Veldara. It orbits what you would call Kepler 442, though that is not our name for it." She gestured toward the ceiling. "About 1,200 of your light years from here." Marcus paused in his stirring. "How is it you speak English?" "We don't, actually," Lyra said with what appeared to be a smile. "The translator implant behind my ear processes your language and allows me to communicate. Neva has one too, though hers is still developing." As if on cue, Neva approached the table, holding up a compass she'd found. "What is this circle that moves, Marcus?" she asked, her voice carrying a melodic quality that made even simple questions sound like music. "It's a compass," he explained, kneeling to her level. "It helps you find your way when you're lost. The needle always points north. Like a stellar navigator, Mama." Neva exclaimed, turning to Lyra. "But much simpler." Marcus couldn't help but smile. "I'm guessing your navigation systems are a bit more advanced." "They were," Lyra said, her expression darkening. "Our escape pod was damaged during our flight." Marcus served the stew, watching as both aliens examined the food cautiously before trying it. Their reactions of pleasant surprise told him their biochemistry must be compatible with Earth food, at least to some degree. "You're refugees, then?" he asked gently. Lyra nodded, the movements of her crystalline filaments slowing. "Our system has been caught in a territorial dispute between two larger alliances. Veldara refused to align with either faction, believing in neutrality. They came at night," Neva added solemnly, showing a maturity beyond her apparent years. "The sky turned red. Our neutrality was not respected," Lyra continued. "I was a botanical engineer, specialized in sustainable ecosystem design. My partner was in the planetary defense forces. He ensured we escaped." The implication hung heavy in the air. Marcus didn't press further. "We were targeted during our escape. Our main vessel was critically damaged, and we jettisoned in the emergency pod. The navigation was compromised, we didn't choose Earth specifically. Your planet was simply the closest habitable world where we could attempt repairs." Outside, the storm had finally subsided, revealing a pristine landscape of untouched snow under a clear night sky. Neva moved to the window, pressing her small hands against the glass. "So many stars," she whispered. "Different patterns than home." "We call those constellations," Marcus said, joining her. "Ancient people used them to tell stories." "We did too," Neva replied. "Mama, can you tell him the story of the luminous hunter?" Lyra joined them at the window, her movement still slightly unsteady. "Perhaps tomorrow, little one. It's time for your rest cycle." After settling Neva into the small bedroom Marcus had prepared, Lyra returned to find him checking the emergency radio for news of any unusual sightings in the area. "You've been kind to us, Marcus Donovan," she said. "Most species would react with fear to unexpected visitors. Maybe I'm not like most people," he replied with a slight smile. "Or perhaps humans are more adaptable than the preliminary data suggested." She studied him with those striking violet eyes. "Your isolation here. Is it common for humans?" Marcus shook his head. "No. Most live in communities. Cities. I came out here after." He hesitated. "After I lost someone. My wife, Elaine. Cancer, a disease. That was 4 years ago." Lyra's filaments pulsed with a gentle amber light. We have a saying on Veldara, shared pain forms bridges between souls, even when they come from different stars. For the first time since finding them, Marcus felt a genuine connection forming, not just curiosity or compassion, but understanding. Two broken lives that had somehow collided across the vastness of space. Neither of them knew yet how profound that connection would become, or how soon their brief sanctuary would be threatened. A week into their stay, the distant sound of helicopter rotors shattered their fragile peace. Marcus was teaching Neva how to identify animal tracks in the snow when they heard it, the unmistakable mechanical thrumming growing steadily louder. Inside, he said sharply, his survival instincts kicking in. Now. Lyra was already at the door, her crystalline filaments flashing with alarm patterns. They found us? Not your people, Marcus replied, scanning the sky through the cabin window. Mine. Military or government, would be my guess. The black helicopter that appeared over the tree line confirmed his suspicions, unmarked, but with the unmistakable profile of government hardware. There would have been reports of the crash, unusual readings, perhaps satellite imagery. Even in this remote location, something like an alien spacecraft wouldn't go unnoticed for long. They cannot find us, Lyra said, her voice tight with panic. Your authorities would confiscate our technology, study us, imprison us. It is the same across most developing worlds. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Alaskan winter. He'd seen enough of how his own government operated to know she wasn't wrong. There's a root cellar under the cabin floor, he said, moving quickly to roll back the large rug in the main room. It's small, but it should hide you both. The helicopter was circling now, likely looking for a place to land in the cleared area beyond his woodshed. Lyra helped Neva into the cramped space beneath the floorboards, then hesitated. What about you? I live here. Nothing suspicious about me being home. He gave what he hoped was a reassuring smile. Stay absolutely silent, no matter what you hear. The next 30 minutes were the longest of Marcus's life. Two men in dark suits, accompanied by a military officer, questioned him about unusual sightings, strange lights in the sky, unexplained sounds. He played the role of the confused hermit perfectly, offering them coffee and rambling about the Wolverine he'd been tracking for weeks. You're sure you didn't notice anything unusual 5 nights ago, Mr. Donovan? The taller agent pressed. Only unusual thing around here is seeing government types this far from civilization, Marcus replied with just the right amount of backwoods suspicion. Storm was pretty bad that night. Didn't stick my nose outside. They searched the cabin perfunctorily, but the root cellar, designed generations ago for hiding from both weather and unwelcome visitors, remained undiscovered. After what seemed like an eternity, the helicopter departed. Marcus waited a full hour before opening the cellar door. Neva emerged first, her small face pinched with fear but showing remarkable composure. Lyra followed more slowly, her expressions shifting through relief, gratitude, and something else Marcus couldn't quite identify. You risked yourself for us, she said later that evening, after Neva had finally fallen asleep. You lied to your own authorities. Marcus stoked the fire, considering his response. Those men don't represent me or what I believe in. They would have treated you as specimens, not people. Still, you have now made yourself complicit. A criminal by your world standards. Lyra moved to sit beside him, her movements now fluid and graceful as her injury continued to heal at its remarkable rate. I have been thinking about our situation. I assume you'll want to repair your ship, try to contact your people. The ship is beyond repair with Earth's technology, she said, shaking her head. And there is no one to contact. We are alone. The finality in her voice was heartbreaking. Marcus tried to imagine being stranded light years from everything familiar, responsible for a child, with no hope of return. You're welcome to stay here, he offered. It's remote enough. We could find a way. That is, what I wish to discuss. Lyra's filaments shimmered with shifting hues of purple and gold, a pattern he hadn't seen before. In my culture, there is a tradition when one saves another's life, particularly when children are involved. She knelt before him in a fluid motion, taking his hands in hers. Her skin felt warmer than a human's, with a subtle texture like fine suede. I offer myself as your bondmate, she said formally. What your ancient cultures might have called a concubine, though the meaning is deeper for us. It is a sacred obligation, a life debt. Marcus pulled his hands away gently, startled. Lyra, I didn't help you expecting anything in return. You misunderstand, she said, her eyes searching his. This is not payment or servitude. The bond is one of mutual protection and loyalty. It honors both parties. Her filaments rippled with emotion. On Veldara, to refuse such an offer would bring shame to both people. Earth isn't Veldara, Marcus said carefully. Our cultures are different. Yes, but we are no longer on Veldara, and you are not bound by its customs. A small smile crossed her features. Consider it my way of offering a formal alliance. Neva and I have no status here, no protection except what you provide. This would give our arrangement structure. Marcus studied her face, trying to understand what lay beneath her words. Was this truly cultural, or was it fear and pragmatism driving her offer? Either way, it felt wrong to accept. Let's just call it friendship for now, he suggested. That's a concept we both understand, isn't it? Lyra's filaments settled into a steady blue glow. Yes, but friendship carries no obligations. What would prevent you from sending us away when we become inconvenient? The question hit him harder than he expected. Is that what you think of me? I think you are kind, Marcus Donovan, she said softly. But kindness can be temporary. The bond one offer is permanent. Before he could respond, a distant sound caught their attention, not the return of the helicopter, but something higher pitched, cutting through the night air. Something that made Lyra's entire body go rigid with recognition and fear. They found us, she whispered. Not your people. Mine. Pack only what you need to survive, Marcus instructed, already pulling emergency supplies from his cabinets. Food, warm clothing, first aid. Lyra moved with urgent precision, her earlier vulnerability replaced by the focused efficiency of someone accustomed to crisis. She slipped a small device from a hidden pocket in her clothing, a flat, oval object that pulsed with soft light as she activated it. What is that? Marcus asked, stuffing thermal blankets into his pack. Tracker Scrambler, she replied. It will buy us a few hours at most. Their technology is far more advanced than what we had on Veldara. Neva stood in the doorway of the small bedroom, clutching a carved wooden fox Marcus had given her. Her crystalline filaments were nearly colorless with fear. The bad ones, Mama, she asked quietly. Lyra knelt before her daughter. Yes, little star. But Marcus is going to help us. Remember what I taught you about being brave? Being brave means being scared but doing what's needed anyway, the child recited, her voice steadying. Marcus felt a surge of admiration for them both. There's an old hunting cabin about 12 miles northwest, near the base of the glacier. It's well hidden and stocked with basic supplies. 12 miles through snow. Lyra's expression was concerned. Neva cannot. I can carry her when she gets tired, Marcus said, already pulling on his Arctic gear. But we need to move now. The night was clear and bitterly cold, the stars painfully bright against the black sky. Under different circumstances, it would have been beautiful. Now, every open space felt like exposure, every shadow a potential threat. Marcus led them along game trails where the snow was shallower, setting a pace that balanced speed with endurance. Lyra moved with surprising agility despite her recent injury, adapting quickly to the snowshoes Marcus had provided. Neva kept up bravely for the first few miles before Marcus hoisted her onto his back, where she clung like a small koala, occasionally pointing out constellations in whispered awe. They had covered perhaps 5 miles when Lyra suddenly froze, her head tilted as though listening. "They've landed," she said, her voice barely audible. "2 vessels, based on the engine signatures." Marcus strained his ears but heard nothing. "How can you tell?" "Our auditory range extends beyond yours," she explained. "They're deploying ground transport. We need to move faster." They pushed on through a dense stand of pines, the snow undisturbed beneath the canopy. Marcus was mentally calculating distances and terrain when a new sound reached even his human ears, a high-pitched whine, like nothing he'd heard before. "Hover sleds," Lyra confirmed grimly. "They're tracking our heat signatures." Marcus made a split-second decision. The river. It's partially frozen this time of year, moving water beneath ice. It might mask our thermal trail. The detour cost them precious time, but Marcus knew these woods intimately. He led them down a treacherous slope to where the river cut through the valley, its surface a patchwork of ice and dark, rushing water. "We follow the edge," he instructed. "Step exactly where I step." The going was painfully slow, the riverbank treacherous with hidden ice beneath the snow. Neva had moved from Marcus's back to Lyra's arms, her face buried against her mother's neck to protect against the biting wind. A sudden, searing light cut through the darkness behind them, sweeping across the trees. "Down!" Marcus hissed, pulling them both into the shadow of a rocky outcrop. The light passed overhead, accompanied by that strange whining sound. Marcus caught a glimpse of sleek, metallic crafts skimming above the tree-line, nothing like any human vehicle he'd ever seen. "How many?" he whispered to Lyra. "4 hunters," she replied, her filaments pulsing with rapid flashes of red. "Elite trackers, cybernetically enhanced for pursuit." "What do they want with you?" "You said you were just refugees." Lyra's eyes met his, filled with regret. "I am a botanical engineer, as I told you. But my work, it had military applications. Biological terraforming that could be weaponized. My partner discovered they were planning to use my research to devastate enemy worlds." Understanding dawned. "You stole the research." She nodded. "Destroyed the original data. They want what's in my head, and they'll use Neva to get me to cooperate." The searchlight swept back in their direction. This time, it paused, focusing on the disturbed snow near their hiding place. "They found our trail," Marcus said grimly. "We need a diversion." He quickly shrugged off his pack, pulling out a small flare gun, standard emergency equipment for Alaskan wilderness guides. "When I fire this, take Neva and run along the river for half a mile, then cut west toward those cliffs," he instructed, pointing to a distant rocky face just visible in the moonlight. "There's a narrow pass that leads directly to the hunting cabin. I'll catch up." "Marcus, no," Lyra began. "This isn't a debate," he cut her off. "You said it yourself, your knowledge is what they want. Neva needs you. I know these woods better than anyone." For a moment, Lyra stared at him, her alien features showing emotions that transcended species. Then she nodded. "The clearing beyond the ridge," Marcus continued. "I'll fire the flare there to draw them away. Wait for the light, then go." He slipped away into the darkness before she could object further, moving with the silent efficiency of someone who had made the wilderness his home. The cold air burned in his lungs as he pushed himself to a sprint, circling wide around their position. The clearing appeared ahead, a flat, open space perfect for what he needed. He raised the flare gun, took aim at the sky, and fired. The brilliant red light burst overhead, illuminating the snowy landscape with an eerie crimson glow. Almost immediately, the whine of the hover sleds changed pitch as they altered course toward his position. Marcus didn't wait to confirm they'd taken the bait. He plunged back into the forest, taking a different route that would eventually reconnect with Lyra and Neva's path, if he survived long enough. Behind him, alien voices called out in a language his human ears found impossible to parse. The hunters had found him. And they were closing in. Marcus's lungs burned as he pushed through knee-deep snow, the alien hunters gaining ground behind him. He'd led them on a desperate chase for nearly an hour, using every trick and terrain advantage he knew. But these weren't human pursuers. They moved with mechanical precision, their enhanced vision cutting through darkness and camouflage alike. A crackling energy bolt struck the tree beside him, sending splinters and steam into the frozen air. They weren't trying to kill him, he realized. They wanted him alive, bait for Lyra and Neva. The narrow pass that led to the hunting cabin was just ahead, a jagged split in the rocky face barely visible in the moonlight. If he could reach it, the confines might neutralize their technological advantages. Another bolt sizzled past his shoulder. Too close. Marcus dove into the pass, rolling to his feet and sprinting down the narrow corridor of stone. The alien pursuers hesitated at the entrance, their hover technology less effective in the confined space. He heard metallic clanking as they dismounted to follow on foot. The passage twisted left, then right, opening finally into a small clearing where the rustic hunting cabin stood, its windows dark. No sign of Lyra and Neva. Had they made it? Were they hiding inside? Or had another hunter found them first? Marcus had no time to investigate. The sound of pursuit echoed through the pass behind him. He needed to keep moving, to draw them away if Lyra and Neva were indeed inside. He was halfway across the clearing when the cabin door burst open. Lyra emerged, holding what appeared to be a sleek, metallic weapon, something she must have kept hidden in her clothing since the crash. "Down," she shouted. Marcus dropped instantly. A pulse of blue-white energy shot over him, striking the first hunter as it emerged from the pass. The alien figure convulsed, then collapsed in a heap of armor and limbs. The remaining hunters took cover among the rocks. Energy bolts crisscrossed the clearing, forcing Marcus to belly crawl toward the cabin. "Neva," he gasped as he reached Lyra's position. Inside, she answered, firing another precise shot that sent one of the hunters scrambling for better cover. "She's preparing the beacon." "Beacon?" Lyra's eyes flashed in the darkness. "Emergency subspace transmitter. I salvaged it from the pod after you rescued us. It's been charging, drawing ambient energy. It's our only way out now." A barrage of energy bolts struck the cabin wall, sending splinters flying. One of the hunters was circling to their flank. "You had this planned all along." Marcus couldn't keep the hurt from his voice, even in their desperate situation. "Not as an escape from you," Lyra said, her filaments pulsing with emotion. "As a last resort. I didn't know if I could trust you at first, and then," she fired again, forcing a hunter back into cover. "Then I didn't want to leave." Inside the cabin, a soft humming began, rising in pitch. Through the window, Marcus could see Neva standing over a small device that glowed with increasing brightness. "It's ready, Mama," the child called. "Go." Lyra pushed Marcus toward the door. "I'll cover you." They retreated into the cabin, Lyra firing methodically to keep the hunters at bay. Once inside, she sealed the door, reinforcing it with a strange, quicksilver substance that spread across the wood like living mercury. "That won't hold them long," she said, moving to where Neva stood beside the now brilliantly glowing beacon. "Marcus, we have perhaps 2 minutes before that door fails." "What happens then?" he asked, searching for anything in the cabin he could use as a weapon. "Then we'll be gone," Lyra said, her eyes meeting his. "The beacon has locked onto a neutral trading outpost in the Proxima system. It will translocate anything within a 5-foot radius." Understanding dawned on Marcus. "You're leaving." "We're offering you the chance to come with us," Lyra corrected, reaching for his hand. "Both of us are." The door shuddered under a heavy impact. The quicksilver reinforcement rippled but held. "Leave Earth?" "Everything I know." Marcus glanced around the simple cabin, the last connection to his life, to Elaine, to everything familiar. I know it's an impossible choice, Lyra said softly. But these hunters will never stop. And your government agents will return too. None of us can stay. Another impact. A crack appeared in the door. Neva stepped forward, taking Marcus's other hand in her small one. You showed me the stars from Earth, she said in her musical voice. I can show you stars from other worlds. The beacon's hum had become a high, singing tone. The air around it shimmered with potential energy. The proposal I made, Lyra said urgently as the door splintered further. Forget the cultural terminology. What I was truly offering was a family. A new beginning, for all of us. Marcus thought of his solitary existence these past years, the emptiness of his days before finding them. What was he really holding on to? 30 seconds, Lyra warned as the Quicksilver reinforcement began to fail. Marcus made his decision. He stepped into the beacon's radius, keeping his hands linked with Lyra and Neva. I don't need alien cultural traditions to know what matters, he said. You're not my bondmates or whatever your world calls it. You're just mine to protect. Mine to care for. If that's enough. It's everything, Lyra whispered, her filaments glowing with a warm golden light he'd never seen before. The door exploded inward. Alien hunters surged through the opening, weapons raised. Too late. The beacon's light engulfed the three of them, human, Veldarin, and child. Marcus felt a sensation like being turned inside out, a breathless moment of absolute displacement. Then stars, countless stars, seen through what appeared to be a vast transparent dome. They stood in a circular chamber of gleaming metal and pulsing light panels. Before them, beings of various species moved about what was clearly a busy spaceport terminal. Welcome to Proxima Station, Lyra said, steadying him as he swayed with disorientation. It's a refugee waypoint. We'll be safe here until we decide where to go next. Where to go? Marcus echoed, his mind struggling to process the impossible vista before him. Neva's small hand squeezed his. Anywhere, she said with childlike simplicity. The whole galaxy. Looking down at her hopeful face, then at Lyra's expression of mingled concern and affection, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the thrill of possibility. They were fugitives, from Earth authorities, from alien hunters, from their own pasts. But they were together. A family forged in crisis, bound by something deeper than cultural traditions or obligations. Anywhere sounds perfect, he said, and meant it. As they stepped forward into the bustling alien concourse, Marcus Donovan, wilderness survival instructor, widower, and now perhaps the first human refugee among the stars, felt the weight of his old life fall away. The path ahead was unknown, filled with dangers he couldn't begin to imagine. But for the first time in years, he wasn't walking it alone.